Welcome to Being at Home with George, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's session. And we'd like to talk about this idea of embracing whatever comes up, saying yes to it, and at the same time generating hope. So today I'd like to talk about this idea, and it's interesting because I teach this online course, and I had a question from one of the participants, one of my students, and they asked me, well, I noticed that I wasn't being mindful. And I said, well, part of the process of being mindful, even when you notice you're not mindful, you're being mindful. And so you could look at this as this idea of making mistakes. And I think one of the reasons that we tend to see that as a failure or not doing what we're supposed to do is because when we make mistakes, we want to move past them and we see them as an indication that we're on the wrong track, rather than seeing it as negative feedback that helps us get back on track. And it's interesting because working with elite performers or people who we call have strong self-efficacy belief or strong self-belief, people who develop that through overcoming obstacles, roadblocks, and pushing through and moving through with persistent effort, not stopping, not quitting, keeping the faith. And no matter how many times we fall down or they fall down, it's getting up. But it's not just getting up, but getting up with enthusiasm, because we have this belief that these mistakes are just feedback and they're opportunities to grow and develop. And it's been my experience that some setbacks and difficulties, especially in human pursuits, when we're trying to do something, serve a useful purpose. And teaching that success usually comes from sustained effort, from learning from our mistakes. And so we can actually use these challenging times as opportunities to level up, to fail up, if you will. And that's the difference between an elite athlete and an immature, is that the elite athlete sees the error as attributed to some lack of effort, insufficient effort, that they need to learn skills, knowledge, and experience. But the main thing is they need to bring more energy, more effort into it. And the normal person or novice, they tend to withdraw energy when they make mistakes instead of bringing more energy in, instead of asking questions, how do I do this? What are the basic fundamentals? And if I go back to the fundamentals and then do error correction, and the error correction is based on me understanding the fundamentals, how things work through investigation and reflection, and then making the change and then keeping it moving. And so that's the really important thing that we don't always get. So no matter what we're doing, we need to understand the right way and the wrong way so that we can be more attentive. When we do it wrong, we know immediately and we can change it. We can make the adjustment. And this idea of changing what we're doing until we can do what we say we want to do. But that takes a certain level of being vulnerable and being willing to make the changes. So I was listening to this audio recording by this guy, Earl Nightingale, and he was talking about this encounter between Lefty Grove and Babe Ruth. And, Lefty Grove was this amazing Cy Young Award pitcher, and Babe Ruth, obviously, for a long time, he held the record for 714 home runs. And this particular game, he was describing the play-by-play, and the first two at-bats, Lefty Grove struck out Babe Ruth with 3 straight pitches. And then later on in the game, near the end of the game, Babe Ruth came up and the bases were loaded, and the first pitch he swung at and missed. The second pitch he swung at, and he swung so hard that he lost his balance and fell down. And then the third time, he hit the ball so far it went over everything. But the interesting thing about Babe Ruth in that game was each time he struck out, he smiled and he had this grin on his face, and he would go to the dugout and come back. So he never lost faith. He just went up with this idea that he was going to get the next hit or get the next pitch. And he talked about law of averages. But the main thing that I got out of that was he hit 714 home runs, but he actually struck out over 1,300 times. So we don't look at the 1,300 times he struck out. We look at the 714 home runs. And so there's a connection between overcoming adversity and sustaining effort and not quitting. And no matter how many times we fall down, we need to be able to get up with that same level of enthusiasm and beginning again, starting from scratch, starting from the jump and going back to basic fundamentals. So I want to talk about another person who had overcome obstacles, and this is Thomas Edison, who actually came up with the light bulb. And he was being interviewed by the media, and they asked him, because up to that point he had tried 5,000 different filaments to make this light bulb work, and it didn't work. And so they interviewed him and they asked him, aren't you ready to quit? You've tried it 5,000 times, 5,000 different filaments of the light bulb, and aren't you ready to quit? And he said, no, I'm not ready to quit. I know exactly 5,000 ways in which it does not work. And as the history tells us, that he ended up needing to go through 6,000 light bulb filaments before he came up with the solution. So there's a prime example of overcoming obstacles and using roadblock as a stepping stone, and we can do that. And it's interesting, in my own experience, in 2015, I released my book, The Mindful Athlete: Secrets to Pure Performance. And I had been trying to write a book for 20 years. And it's interesting. So even though I teach this stuff and I've been going through this, it took me 20 years to write it. And the interesting thing is when I stopped trying to write it is when it wrote itself. And so there's something here about persistence. There's something about seeing mistakes as opportunities and understanding that we develop a sense of efficacy or self-belief by overcoming obstacles and continuing to sustain the effort, to be persistent with what we're doing. Don't quit, don't stop until we get to where we need to get to. And so to me, I like this saying. I say it's a Georgism. That's what my folks tell me. It's a Georgism: no struggle, no swag. And quoting Nietzsche, he said, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. And so that's the thing we need to understand, is how do we embrace the difficulties and generating hope, but then how to making the effort, seeking to understand, asking what are the fundamentals, and going back to basic fundamentals and repetition, error correction, repetition, but also bringing this quality of what we call a Hall of Fame: hope, optimism, and faith. And as they say, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So it means committing to our outcome, committing to our process, even though everything else in the environment is telling us that it's not working. And when you have that strong self-efficacy belief or strong self-belief, we set more challenging goals and we have more stick-to-itiveness. We stay on task. We keep doing it until we can do it.